Ferrari did not call an emergency meeting because Lewis Hamilton finished lower than expected. They called it because his Austrian data may have shown something much more dangerous. Not a mistake, not a bad setup, not a driver losing confidence. A defect, the kind of hidden weakness that does not destroy a race with smoke and fire, but quietly steals speed, drains energy, hurts the tires, and turns a podium fight into damage control before anyone outside the garage understands why. And here is the frightening part. Hamilton's Ferrari kept running. That means the car did not fail in the obvious way. It exposed something worse. Because if the data is right, Austria was not just a bad weekend for Ferrari. It may have been the first clear proof that Hamilton is fighting a car with a built-in limitation, one that even a 7-time world champion cannot hide forever. And now Fred Vasseur has to answer the question Ferrari fears most. Can this defect be fixed quickly, or did Austria reveal the flaw that could destroy Hamilton's championship dream? At first, Ferrari tried to make Austria look manageable. That is what big teams do after a painful race. They do not walk into the cameras and admit panic. They talk about pace. They talk about tires. They talk about execution. They say the race was difficult, the balance was not perfect, and the team will analyze everything back at the factory. Those words sound calm. But behind those words, the data tells a different story. And Ferrari's problem after Austria was not that Lewis Hamilton had a difficult afternoon. The problem was that his car seemed to follow a pattern that was too clear to ignore. Early promise, then fading speed. Early belief, then defensive driving. Early hope, then damage control. That is not just disappointing. That is dangerous. Because when a car fades in a predictable way, engineers stop asking what went wrong during the race. They start asking what was wrong before the race even began. And that is where Fred Vasseur's emergency meeting becomes so important. A team principal does not gather the key people because a driver is frustrated. Frustration is normal in Formula One. A team principal does not call everyone together because fans are angry. Ferrari fans are always emotional because Ferrari means more than just lap time. The real reason a meeting becomes urgent is evidence. Hard evidence. Numbers that show the car is losing performance in places where it should be strong. Data that shows the same weakness repeating. Traces that suggest Hamilton was not simply lacking pace, but being limited by the machine underneath him. That is the detail that changes everything. Because a driver can have a bad day. A strategy can miss the perfect window. A tire set can fall away earlier than expected. But when the data points toward a car defect, the whole story shifts. Suddenly, the question is not, why did Hamilton lose ground? The question is, how long has Ferrari been hiding this weakness without fully admitting what it could cost? That is the part that makes Austria feel bigger than one Grand Prix. Hamilton's Ferrari did not look broken in the way casual viewers expect. There was no car parked beside the barrier. There was no smoke from the engine cover. There was no dramatic radio message telling him to stop the car. He finished, and that made the result easier to dismiss for anyone who only looked at the classification. But Formula One is not understood by looking only at where a driver finishes. It is understood by looking at how the result happened. And how Hamilton's race happened is exactly why Ferrari had to be worried. The car started the weekend with enough potential to create belief. It gave Ferrari something to work with. It gave Hamilton a platform. It gave the garage the feeling that the race could still turn into something meaningful. But then came the slow loss. Not a single disaster. A gradual retreat. The kind of retreat that tells the pit wall, we are not choosing our race anymore. The race is choosing for us. And for a team like Ferrari, that is unacceptable. Ferrari does not build its identity around survival. Ferrari builds around attack, around pressure, around being the team everyone watches because something historic could happen at any second. But in Austria, Hamilton was not fully attacking the race. He was managing the consequences of the car. That difference matters. A driver attacking a race sounds different on the radio. The messages are about gaps ahead, opportunities, tire life that can be used, and moments to push. A driver managing consequences hears a different language. Protect this. Watch that. Save energy. Be careful with temperatures. Think about the tires. Do not overuse the car. Those are normal Formula One instructions. But when they start to define the entire race, they become a warning. Because it means the car is not giving the team freedom, is giving them restrictions. And restrictions are exactly what Hamilton did not join Ferrari to accept. He came to Ferrari for the biggest gamble of his career. Not because it was easy. Not because Ferrari was guaranteed to dominate. But because if it worked, It would become one of the most powerful stories Formula One has ever seen. Lewis Hamilton, in red, trying to bring Ferrari back to the top. That idea alone carries pressure. In the United States, it turns a racing story into a legacy story. In the United Kingdom, it turns every Ferrari result into a national talking point because Hamilton is not just another driver. He is a figure people have watched for years through dominance, controversy, heartbreak, reinvention, and now this final act in red. So when Austria exposed something ugly in the data, it was never going to stay small. Because this is not only about a car. It is about whether Ferrari can give Hamilton the ending his career deserves. And here is where the first real twist appears. The car defect does not have to look dramatic to be devastating. In fact, the most dangerous defects in Formula One often look boring from the outside. A car that overheats slightly. A hybrid system that does not deploy energy long enough. A power unit that forces conservative settings. A balance issue that makes the tires work too hard. A drag problem that leaves the driver vulnerable at the end of straight. None of that creates a spectacular replay. But each one steals time. A tenth here, a tenth there, a little more tire wear, a little less battery, a little more defending, a little less attacking. And by the end of the race, a podium fight has become fifth place, and everyone outside the garage is asking why Ferrari looked so ordinary. That is why the word defect matters. A defect is not the same as a bad setup. A setup can be changed. A defect suggests something deeper, something built into the way the car behaves, something that may require Ferrari to rethink more than wing angles and tire pressures. And if Hamilton's Austrian data really exposed that kind of weakness, then Vasseur's meeting was not about calming people down. It was about deciding whether Ferrari still had control of the season. Because control is everything in Formula One. When a team controls the car, it can control strategy. When it controls strategy, it can control pressure. When it controls pressure, it can control the race. But when the car has a defect that forces compromises, the whole chain breaks. Strategy becomes reactive. The driver becomes defensive. The pit wall becomes cautious. The rivals become braver. And once rivals sense weakness, they attack it again and again. That is exactly why Austria may become one of the most important weekends in Hamilton's Ferrari story. Not because of the final position, not because of a headline, because it may have revealed the moment Ferrari stopped believing the problem was just performance and started fearing it was structural. Structural is the word that changes the room. If the issue is performance, you search for more speed. If the issue is structural, you search for the flaw that is holding all the speed back. That is much more serious. It means the car may have pace in certain conditions, but not enough consistency across a full race. It means Hamilton may be able to fight when the track suits Ferrari, but suffer when the circuit exposes the weakness. It means the season becomes unpredictable in the worst possible way. Not because Ferrari is always slow, because Ferrari is fast enough to create hope, then fragile enough to damage it. That is the trap. And Ferrari knows it. A hopeless car is painful, but simple. You accept the season is about rebuilding. You stop pretending every weekend is a breakthrough. You focus on development. But a flawed fast car is torture. It keeps everyone believing just long enough to make every failure feel like betrayal. It tells the driver the win is close. It tells the team one upgrade could change everything. It tells the fans do not give up yet. Then Austria happens, and the same weakness returns at racing speed. Hamilton can feel it before anyone else. He feels when the car stops pulling as strongly. He feels when the tires begin to complain. He feels when the balance becomes harder to trust. He feels when the rival behind is not just faster, but faster in the exact place where defending is almost impossible. And when a driver like Hamilton feels that, the data usually confirms it. That is why Ferrari cannot treat Austria like an ordinary bad day. The most experienced driver in the garage had just delivered information the team could not ignore. Not only through words, through the car's behavior, through the lap traces, through the way the race slipped away. And that is the foundation of the entire drama. Before Ferrari can think about winning again, before Vasseur can talk about recovery, before fans can believe the championship dream is still alive, the team has to answer the first question. Was Austria a one-off failure, or was it the clearest proof, yet that Hamilton's Ferrari is carrying a defect that could follow him everywhere? The second question was even more uncomfortable, because if Austria exposed a defect, Ferrari had to understand what kind of defect it was. A Formula One car can be wrong in many different ways. Sometimes the car lacks grip. Sometimes it overheats. Sometimes it eats through tires too quickly. Sometimes it has too much drag, which means it cuts through the air badly, like running into the wind with a heavy jacket on. Sometimes the hybrid energy does not arrive in the right way, or does not last long enough. And to the audience, all of those problems can look the same. The car is slower. The driver cannot attack. The rival gets closer. The result slips away. But inside Ferrari, those problems are completely different, because one can be fixed with setup. Another needs a new part. Another needs a different cooling solution. Another could point toward the power unit itself. And that is the nightmare version. The power unit is not just an engine. It is the heart of the car. It is where fuel, heat, electrical energy, and raw acceleration all come together. When that heart is strong, everything else becomes easier. The car can defend. The car can attack. The driver can use strategy instead of being trapped by it. But when that heart is not working exactly as planned, the entire race starts bending around the weakness. That is what Ferrari had to investigate after Hamilton's Austrian data. Not whether the car was slow. That was obvious. They had to investigate why the car became slow in the moments that mattered most. And this is where the story becomes much more dangerous for Vasseur. Because there is a huge difference between a car that lacks pace all weekend and a car that begins the race with pace, then loses its edge under stress. The first problem is visible. The second one hides. It hides behind qualifying speed. It hides behind strong opening stint. It hides behind a few encouraging laps that make everyone believe the weekend is under control. Then the race gets hotter. The tires age. The battery cycles again and again. The power unit runs under pressure. The car stops behaving like it did at the start. And suddenly Ferrari is not fighting the opponent ahead. Ferrari is fighting its own limitations. That is why the data from Austria mattered more than the finishing position. A result tells you what happened. Data tells you how it happened. And in Hamilton's case, the how was the part that would have worried the garage.